You can raise your hand, or if you're in the audience, you can type in the Q&A. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, so we'll go to our 7:05 agenda. The review of our, continue the review of our FY23 department budgets. And we're starting off with Westford Public Schools and a discussion on full-day kindergarten. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Chu, I'm assuming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a shorter presentation prepared. Dr. Cleary was able to create a shorter presentation similar to the one that we had presented back in the fall. So the idea being is that there has been a little bit of confusion that some people have had in our discussions about full day kindergarten. And so, you know, we were able to present back in the fall a proposal to bring tuition-free full day kindergarten to Westford Public Schools. It's something that they've been looking to do for a number of years now. And in February, I'm very pleased to say that the school committee voted to approve the proposal. So next fall, we will have tuition-free full day kindergarten in the town of Westford. And I know it's something that a lot of people are very excited about. So I'm very happy to see that we've been able to do that this year. And part of that presentation included how we strategically planned to carve that into our budget over the next couple of years. And so I know there were some questions around that, which is really why we're having the conversation tonight, so that people can ask some more clarifying questions around our fiscal plan to do this. But I just wanted to kind of, remind people who might be listening as to why we might be talking about this this evening. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Cleary so she can kind of share the presentation that she's created.
Great, thank you. And I think Dan is going to share, there we go, the presentation. So Chris kind of did the introduction. I don't think I have to dive too deeply into how we got here, but I'm grateful for the school committee, or to the school committee, for being so supportive of this initiative that we've been talking about now for many years, but simply didn't have the means to move forward. So let's go to the next slide, please, Dan. So here is some of our rationale for wanting to shift to full day kindergarten. And to be quite honest with you, these bullets only scratch the surface, but I think that they're the most salient points so that you all understand where we're coming from in terms of the key drivers for wanting to shift to expand full day kindergarten to become tuition free. First, it's more time for social and emotional growth, both explicitly being taught from teachers. We have curriculum that supports this, as well as opportunities for incidental learning, for problem solving. If there's a dispute on the playground, for example, there's more opportunities for teachers and grown-ups to swoop in to help students develop the skills to navigate through those social situations and to cope appropriately emotionally with whatever situations may come their way throughout the day. Teachers also develop a deeper relationship with students and families. Instead of having up to 40 students, 20 in the AM and 20 in the PM, the full day kindergarten, which consists of approximately 20 students for the entire day, it's just more time to be able to do outreach with families and partner with them, as well as with the students having a 6-hour day. Moving on to the third bullet, it provides more time for opportunities for deeper learning in content areas. The state frameworks, the curriculum frameworks for all content areas in kindergarten are the same for half day or full day. It does not differentiate. So knowing what we know about how students learn, providing them with deeper opportunities to dive into and apply the skills and the knowledge that they obtain is certainly going to set them up more for future success. It also provides more opportunities for targeted instruction. We always talk about differentiation in the classroom and making sure that we use information about students and then tailor our instruction so it meets their needs. And this provides opportunities to do that, versus in the shorter half day, it's much more difficult for teachers to pull out students for small group instruction and to get those one-on-one interactions during their learning to help learn specifically of what each child needs. And so therefore, we can intervene earlier. The second to last bullet, it creates a stronger sense of community within the classroom. Students get to know one another, feel more comfortable with the teacher, opportunities for partner work, which we know students feeling like they're in a safe, welcoming, comfortable environment makes them much more available to learn. And then students in full day receive more specials such as health, spirit, which is, it supports our code of conduct in a engaging way, as well as innovation lab, whereas our half-day students don't have all of those specials. They just have PE and some music. So there's an inequity there in terms of access to these other types of specials. So if we shift to full day, all students would be able to attend all of those classes each week. So we've been talking about that for a long time, and part of those bullets were part of our presentation when we initially came forward with the proposal for the tuition-based full-day kindergarten. So those are the same, but then the question is, why now? So we have been talking about it for a long time, but I think the piece that really released the logjam, so to speak, was the ESSER III funds. And we have $587,730 available to us that we can use for an initiative like this. And the state was really pushing for districts not to buy more hand sanitizer or air purifiers, but to make significant changes to your programming that are long lasting. So having this extra infusion of funds that are available to us certainly opened the doors to allow us to think of this as a possibility. We also did have to apply to the state with this exact idea and details. It was approved, so it very much is a ESSER III approved expense. Second bullet, we have students who are coming in with minimal preschool experience, which is directly related to COVID. We also have a lack, or have had a lack, of robust early intervention. In school years 20 and 21, our EI, early intervention experience for students, was remote only, which certainly did not have the level of impact that it would with one-on-one. And early intervention is for students from newborn up to 3 years old. And then once they turn 3, then their services get handed over to the school district. So EI, early intervention, only being remote, certainly had some impact on students' development who needed those extra services. Students who participated in our Westford preschool program didn't have any peer models last school year. So the students who were 3 last year will be in kindergarten next year. And there was 1 year where we did not allow role model students to enroll into our preschool, and it was just being held for the special education services and the students receiving those. And then finally, just generally speaking and anecdotally, our kindergarten staff have been saying throughout the year that our students are presenting in atypical ways, some with less exposure to social interactions, and some who are having some behavioral difficulties more so than a typical year. In addition to the rationale that I just provided, we also just want to showcase that there is in fact a demand. So since we started this full day K program in FY 17, which starts in October of 2016 there, you can see 64% of our kindergarten students attended half day and 36 attended full day. And then over the years, because of wait lists, we continued to increase our number of full day kindergarten sections because the demand was there. So you can see in 2021, of the 283 kindergarten students we have, 214 of them have chosen to attend the full day, whereas 69 of them are attending the half day. You'll see on this slide that we don't have a bar for October 2020, and that was last school year. That's because we did not offer full day kindergarten due to the pandemic and the hybrid model. So we didn't have half day versus full day for that 1 year. Next slide. That was the Westford demand. Now just looking a little bit more globally across the Commonwealth, of the 311 total districts in Massachusetts that have full day kindergarten enrollment, 92.3% of them offer tuition-free full day kindergarten. The remaining 24 districts, Westford being one of those 24, offer tuition-based. So this is certainly a trend. We're kind of behind the times in terms of moving forward in this direction to offer tuition-free full day kindergarten. And you can see here that there's just not many left. We're a little concerned, and there has been a subtle signal from the state that within the next, I don't know what number, but several years, it may be a requirement. And in that case, without additional funds like ESSER, then we could be looking to need upwards of $800,000 to implement it ourselves. And we know that with some of these mandates from the state, or most of these mandates from the state, they're not typically funded. So we don't expect to wait it out and then have funding to move forward. We think that this is the right time and a great way to use these funds. So just to give you a little bit of the financial information around full day kindergarten, the left-hand snapshot of the spreadsheet that's all in yellow, that shows you what our offsets, what we use the tuition to offset in our operating budget. So we currently rely on $696,834 of full day kindergarten tuition to offset our operating budget. And you can see in the list, in the breakdown, part of each of those roles are offset by the K tuition. So that's money that we would have to make up in this model, because moving forward, we would no longer have the tuition to offset that $696,000. Moving on to the blue, in addition to the offsets in the yellow, the blue shows us additional costs that we would incur moving to the full tuition-free full day K model. So it would be an additional $140,000, which is $5,000 for classroom setup, because it would be a new classroom. So $5,000 is the standard amount we use. Then we would need an additional 1.5 classroom teachers. And every kindergarten class has a TA, a teaching assistant, associated with it. So there would be an additional 1.5 TAs that would be needed as well. So the total additional cost is $140,000. So that bottom right-hand white box gives you the total current offset along with the additional expenses. So for FY23, the cost of full day tuition-free kindergarten is $836,834. Next slide. So then there's the elephant in the room, and you'll have to click twice here, Dan, because there are 2 points. The first is that the ESSER 3 grant does not cover the entire cost of full day kindergarten. And the second, the ESSER 3 grant is a one-time funding source. So we're looking to implement something that we're able to sustain But the reality is ESSER 3 is not coming to us every year. It's essentially a one-time fund. Next slide. So the left-hand box shows you just a reminder of what was on the slide 2 slides ago, that the total cost with the current offsets and additional expenses total $836,834. In addition, we wanted to show what funds are available to help us fund this kindergarten initiative. They're also one-time funds, but using them strategically, we'll show you in a future slide, we would be able to make this work. The full day kindergarten revolving account, which we're talking about, that's the tuition. We had conservatively assumed in this model that we would have $319,500 as a balance at the end of the year that we would be able to apply to this. We also have had kindergarten extended day, that's represented as KED here. And the kindergarten extended day, we actually don't run anymore, but when we did, it was offering after school or before school childcare to the students who attended the half-day kindergarten program. So for the students who came in the half-day, AM, morning only, we offered childcare, not school, childcare for the PM so that they could be at school for the full time for ease of busing and parents who may not be available at that half-day mark. And then also the opposite of that is for the students who were in PM, afternoon kindergarten, they had the opportunity, if they chose, to pay and come for daycare, childcare in the morning. And we do currently have an $82,472 balance in that account. And then the third one-time fund available is the ESSER 3, which I had already talked about. So the total of all 3 of those one-time funds that we're using to strategize the implementation of the model total $989,702. Next slide. So using those different funding sources, this is our plan to, over time, gradually wean off of those one-time funding sources because we can't rely on them forever. And it does it in a way that incrementally absorbs it back into the operating budget. So in FY23, for this first year, we wanted to make a plan that ended up being operating budget neutral. And so we did that. If you look at the very left-hand side under FY23, it would be using half of the ESSER 3 funds, the $277,665, plus part of or a third of the full day kindergarten revolving account, plus our kindergarten extended day money, and the rest coming out of school choice, the remainder, the $370,000. So the direct cost to the operating budget for that single year would be 0. Moving on to FY24, you'll see here we start to bring it into the operating budget, but not all at once as an $800,000 expense. We used the other funds gradually, with ESSER, the other half of ESSER being used in FY24. And then a second third of the full day kindergarten revolving account, we will have expended the KED, the extended day, so that we wouldn't be using that. And then we would be using $145,000 of school choice. And then that would leave an additional $319,306 that we would use from our operating budget and build that into our FY24 operating budget. So we know that now. So in October, when we really start diving into the FY24 budget process, we'll know that $319,000 has to be built in. And then you can see it's the same methodology for FY25. but those one-time funds over the course of the next 4 years become grayed out. And then soon our entire operating budget would be able to, again, incrementally absorb it. The new amount each year that we would have to build into the budget is the bottom larger number outside of the box. So in FY24, we would build 319,000 into our budget. In FY25, it would be an additional 289 that we would build into that budget. And that may come from a number of different places or strategies. It could come from prioritizing. It could come from enrollment, which I know we had this year almost $500,000 that we reduced due to enrollment. So we would continue gradually until FY28. It would be an additional 18,000 that we would have to build in. And then after that, it would just be already absorbed in the budget. So this is a way to wean off over time. Yes, it does impact the budget, but having 319,000 being the highest amount that it impacts versus is a much more feasible scenario than if we just have to do it ourselves. We don't have the ESSER funds and would have to spend almost $1 million that would have to figure out, from a town or school perspective to implement that all at once, which we think would not be feasible. It's why we haven't been able to bring it forward since the start of full day K. I think that's it.
Thank you, Carrie. Great job.
Yes, thanks. Do you guys have anything else to add, or can I open it up to questions?
Open it up to questions.
Okay. Anyone have questions? Anybody on the boards have questions? Dennis?
I'd like to hear what Jody Ross's take is on the incremental decrease or the waning of the kindergarten count over time. I want to see what she thinks, how feasible that is.
So I guess, what my only concern that I see is that it has been difficult in the past 13, 14 years for the schools to try to run the schools within the number that they have. And so I guess I just think it's going to be hard if you're trying to find those funds within your budget above and beyond the numbers that we're able to share. So that would be my biggest concern, that on paper, it sounds good, but we've all been here and experienced the difficulties through the years of trying to balance the school's needs with the funding that's available. So I see it as being a challenge for the schools.
Thank you.
So Chris, in an earlier meeting, did a good job explaining about how roughly the budget add corresponds to the decrease in enrollment and how those numbers sort of line up. And maybe if you could just comment about sort of a source of funds, I guess, that you'll see from decreased enrollment and why that's predictable. Because I think there's two things there. One is the order of magnitude money about right? And then how predictable is a decline in enrollment? Like how much can we bank on the fact that we're going to have fewer students in fewer classrooms?
Sure. Thank you. So one of the basic examples is just the idea that we were looking at the number of sections that exist in our middle schools for next year. And so we know that the current 5th grade class that's going into 6th grade is allowing us to decrease the 6th grade sections by 2, right? And we know that that same group is going to continue to go through 7th and 8th grade and then eventually get into the academy. And so that number is just smaller than the other grades. So we know that we'll be able to predict that decrease alone over the next couple of years. Plus, the other thing is when we look at the numbers that are currently in our elementary schools, they're leveling out. So they're less than what is in the academy right now. The largest number of students right now are in Westford Academy. And as they continue to graduate, the number of students that we have in the elementary schools have just leveled to a place where we know that we needed to increase our staffing over the years to support the higher number of students that have just kind of gone through the district. But we just know that we're able to kind of rethink our resources in that regard. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
Yeah, I think just what you explained to us in a joint chairs meeting at some point in the past was that the order of magnitude money is about right in terms of this reduction of need for classrooms. And it is pretty predictable because you've got, a large class size that's graduated and smaller ones that are coming. So that gave me some comfort that we're not believing in magic here, that you've got a way to, just through the declining enrollment we're seeing, sort of size this in as you go.
Yeah, thank you for restating that. but that's the idea, is that we just automatically we can see some of the impact that takes place as we do watch specific classes go through the system. And then we just know that the numbers that we're looking at in the elementary schools, as they continue to go through and as they then ultimately go to the academy, we know that we'll be able to see certain places where we can rethink our staffing patterns.
Thank you. Scott?
Thanks. So I guess I think if I heard correctly, this year through declining enrollment, we saved $500,000. Yeah, the school budget is what, $1 million higher than last year, or $1.2 million or something. So we didn't actually save the money. We saved it from a baseline, but in terms of actual spending, we more than spent that savings by over $1 million. So when I see a number of $39,000 next year, trying to figure out how we factor the increasing cost every year plus $300,000 problem on top of that. How does that gel with, I guess, past behavior with declining enrollments not really giving us any real savings?
So I think if I'm understanding, Scott, I think one of the issues is that the last couple of years, the town allocation has needed to be significantly smaller than what it had been historically as well. And one of the issues that we had going into building FY23 was dealing with the one-time use funds that were used to bring us into FY22. So when we looked at the enrollment and we were able to decrease our request and our need by the 500,000, that was also helping us to recover from I think it was $576,000 is the number that's jumping to my mind. Pat can certainly correct me, that was used as one-time funds to balance the FY22 budget. So I don't know if the increase is that you were just describing is actually what really happened. I don't know if I said that clearly, but the idea being that we were trying to, by managing and figuring out rolling the budget forward for FY23, what we were looking at was this initial hole of this one-time use funds that were used to just even close out FY22. And this specific plan that we've developed strategically was, again, using one-time use funds. But what I think Carrie said well was that we are focused clearly on weaning off of those needs. So we're developing a plan where we will be carving this out of our budget so that then we're weaning ourselves off of it.
You're all set, Scott.
You know, I understand. I'm not convinced, but I understand.
Tom?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Couple things come to mind. First, to Jody's point, it is going to be a challenge going forward, but it's a challenge that Dr. Chu, the school committee, and the rest of the school department is aware of, and we're aware of as a finance committee, as a select board. And you know, to me, anything worth doing is going to be hard. If it was easy, it'd been done 20 years ago. I think there's some other offsets that have been just in the past, like not having the midday bus runs that might have some offset, but also just fresh eyes from the leadership of the school department may produce some different ways of doing things, different savings. But the other thing that comes to mind is that this really is an equity matter as well. Equity for all of our students going through a great school system from the beginning. You know, everyone will now have the same opportunities. And then the last thing that comes to mind is something that was raised several times at town meetings in the past, and that's the true cost to taxpayers of education. The tuition-based kindergarten, I don't think was really represented. It was represented as an income source, you know, but it was an income source on a smaller population. It wasn't spread across the entire town. So it's still going to cost the town one way or the other. It's just a matter of who pays for it. So I do think that knowing that this is coming, that these increases are coming, everyone can be kind of really putting our heads together and trying to plan for them.
Thanks, Tommy. All set. I'm just going to go to Heather, and then I'll get to you, Dennis.
I was just gonna say, I thought Jody said it really well. And this is my 7th year going through the budget process, and it's always been a huge struggle. And I just, you know, it sounds like there's some ideas out there of where the money would come from, but it's always so tight. There's always unexpected cuts that aren't planned, and it just always seems to be an issue. So even it's 300,000, it seems like it's going to be a monumental task. And then the only other point I want to make, and I think someone just said equity. I never paid for my children to go to full day K. I opted to do other outside extra activities with them. It just feels really wrong to me that the parents that have been paying into full day K for the last 3-4 years are essentially helping to pay for this coming kindergarten class and the class after that. And that's just a comment I don't really need.
Dennis, did you have something?
Yes. I think the first issue that we have to consider, and I go back to the town manager's budget report back in February. We've just come out of a very tumultuous, uncertain time period. We're trying to get ourselves back together again here, and she cautioned us at that time not to embark on any spending that would reliance on one-time funds. Now, I understand. I think Kerry Cleary's layout of the transition is a very useful one. I appreciate that, and it's very interesting to see that. So it does show a path, but there are some concerns that we have to ask ourselves. Those of us who've been watching this budget, like Heather and a few of us for years. One of them is we don't know what the impact is going to be from the state. Always, that's always a concern. So what's going to be the increase or the hits on special education tuition over the time? We've been putting a lot of emphasis on wellness, wellness investments, and as far as we also have collective bargaining coming up. So that's going to impact the money that we have. And I think what we're dealing with here is priorities. We have to really face priorities. I mean, if we're going to go and embark on something like this, we have to really start considering what are we going to give up on this if we're going to move into this area, because certainly we're not going to increase taxation, property taxation. We need to try to keep it within the means we have, and if these funds can help and do that, that's fine. But I still think that it's very, very important to really seriously consider all the unaccounted for contingencies that happen, particularly in the school budget, that more than any other budget in the town that we have to deal with each year. And I would like to see if you want to transition into this and you want to go to full-time kindergarten, full-day kindergarten, a plan, a reorganization within the school department itself, without the reliance on the one-time funds, I think would be a very, very interesting little exercise. I'm not faulting you to use them. If you have them, you should use them. But I think there's a little bridge that's going to have to be jumped over the next 2-3 years down when they tail off. And if we're not ready, we're going to get hit with some big high costs. And I think we need to consider that.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else? I'm not really seeing anything. I think I'll wrap up the full day kindergarten discussion and just say that it's pretty clear that several people will be very interested to see what happens next year's budget cycle. And so good luck to you. Anything else on any of the follow-up for WPS? I had one question on the DESI's calculation for the foundation budget. Pat, the student population that were held harmless to was like 5,065, I think it was in your memo, and it was calculated back in FY13. How does that work with the state? When are they going to recalculate that foundation budget at some point?
So that's a little bit misleading. So let me clarify a little bit. So the dollar amount that's allocated, so X percentage of your population is assumed to be special education, which is an additional allocation. X percent of your population is assumed to be out of district. Right now, I think they're doing an average out of district tuition. I don't want to quote the figure because I might be wrong. So it's not that if we got back up to 5,065 students, it would yield the same amount of money that it did years ago, right? It's a calculation that has evolved over time. So rather than focusing on the 5,065, the answer would really be to focus on until we get to reaching the 17 million and change, until our foundation calculation reaches the 17 million and change, we're going to be held harmless that whole time. And we won't get more than, they throw an extra $30 per student in there, okay? So the hold harmless amount keeps increasing a little bit, okay? But we're not going to get there. We're kind of like running after a train that keeps pulling down the track. And I don't even know what the 5,065 would get us anymore because the calculation has changed since FY13.
So we're held harmless on the 17 million.
Plus, remember, so last
Right.
year's hold harmless was 17 and 281. And then this year's is 17,416 because it's the $30 extra per head. So that hold harmless amount is also moving down the track. And we benefit from that part of it.
But they're not going to go and recalculate that at some point and set us back to 15 million or something.
I was comforted by the fact that there are 135 districts under that hold harmless. So I thought it would just be catastrophic. And the value of it, right? I think we said that 57% of our aid comes from hold harmless, right? So that's a lot of money.
Okay, thanks. So anything else for the school system?
Follow up on that just a bit. And Dr. Chu can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he said that if our school population is not increasing, then not that the foundation budget is directly related, but our school aid from the state is also impacted. We don't get any increases. I may be wrong, but I think that's an important consideration as well.
Right. So yeah, that is what they were just talking about. Because at one time, the concept of going from half day to full day tuition free, we were hoping would mean that because because we have half day program and that is actually what we offer, because it's a tuition based full day program that we offer right now, our kindergarten students are actually only counted as 0.5 instead of a full student. So one of the first things we explored was, well, the idea of once you actually bring those students to full day, they would then be considered 1.0 as a student. And so our hope was that would bring our numbers back up again. And so what I was talking about, Dennis, was the idea that when we looked at that, we're so far below the hold harmless numbers at this moment in time that by just transitioning to tuition-free full day kindergarten, it would not increase our student aid. And so then what Pat was talking about was the idea that it's the combination of the number of students, but also the category that they're in, because elementary students, middle school students, and high school students, along with special education students, all have a different formula that the state uses when they're determining what their support is for. So initially, that was one of the things that we thought when we looked at, I mean, it's something that we have said for a number of years in the district. Oh, if we could go to full day tuition free, then that would increase our numbers and that would be helpful. And we're just realizing that our numbers are just so far below what that hold harmless number is, that going to tuition free is not going to increase our state aid. If that clarified that, Dennis.
Yeah, it's,
That's what-
they're moving the goalposts on you. That's what's going on.
They are moving the goalposts on us, right? And I think Pat did a really nice job trying to answer Christina's question.
He did.
Because Christina, the harsh reality is that they could change the rules again on us. But I think Pat's right that we've learned that there are so many districts that are in the same predicament in terms of the numbers have changed, that it truly would be disastrous on the state level if they were to reassess everybody.
The only other thing I just wanted to mention quickly, it's really de minimis, it's a minimal amount, but our preschool student, our kindergarten students would then count as a 1 rather than a 0.5, as Dr. Shu mentioned. So rather than getting $15 per kindergartner, which is really what we're getting right now because they're a 0.5, when they increase, we would go to 30. It's about a $4,000 difference. That's really the only mathematical change.
Well, that's positive, Pat. That's good.
Thank you, Pat. Anything else? I'm not seeing anything. Thank you very much for coming back. Thank you for all those answers. Thank you, school committee. I don't know if you want to adjourn or stay on. You're welcome.
I think we'd like to officially adjourn. Some of us may choose to stay on, but to make it official, I would take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, Sean,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Gloria,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
Catherine,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. That's unanimous 6-0. We are adjourned. Thanks, FinCom and Select Board.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to general government. Any questions for the select board, town manager, finance committee, finance department, town accountant, board of assessors? Actually, I have a question for the assessors.
I do too, when you get done.
Okay. I'll let you go first, Dennis. Go ahead.
All right. I had just wanted to ask a question about reevaluations. How often do we do the reevaluations? And are the reevaluations, can you explain there are some people that I've had some conversation with that have indicated that they've seen some dramatic increases in their evaluation. And they kind of look at this as a round robin way of circumventing Proposition 2.5, but I'm not going to spare you with that, the rhetoric. But I'm wondering if you could just explain to me, if you could, how frequently you do the evaluations, and what are the factors that you utilize that allow you to increase an evaluation on a piece of property?
Okay, thank you. My name is Will Nacer. I'm the principal assessor for the town. So every year we review the values. They should be adjusting each year. I started here May of last year, so this will kind of be my first year to go through the process. So when you're talking about the residential properties, you're talking about reviewing sales that have occurred in the prior year. And we're talking about commercial industrial properties or income properties. You're talking about sales, but more importantly, an income approach to value. So it's a different method altogether. So Proposition 2.5 doesn't have any bearing on a single property. You can adjust a single property as much up or down or not change it at all. The 2.5% does not pertain to a single property, nor even a class of properties. That pertains to another thing altogether that I can get into that if you'd like, but that doesn't have any bearing. So the adjustments are market-based. Generally, Westford's a big residential, a lot of residential. So we're looking at the market. If anybody is just vaguely awake about real estate, residential properties, you've seen what type of increases. So you will see some significant jumps in the property values.
One last follow-up question, if I may. When you talk about the relative values, is that based on a townwide value or within neighborhoods and districts within the town?
The values are based on the entire community of Westford. However, there is a drill down that I'll look at different sections of Westford, water areas, styles by colonials versus ranches. So we have sophisticated software that helps us. So I'm able to do some analysis kind of in a micro level and in a macro level throughout the town.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dennis. So my question, Will, is more on the commercial and industrial properties versus residential. And I put a question in our questions that we submitted to you last week about that comparison and why, just looking back at, I think it was FY22, the residential properties increased by 7.8% and the commercial industrial pretty much stayed flat. And why that difference happens?
Well, again, it's market based. So the residential property in virtually all of Massachusetts, but certainly Eastern Massachusetts, the increases have been pretty significant, Westford being no different for the residential, but the analysis done on the commercial industrial properties, we weren't seeing any value changes. So I think there was no adjustment to commercial and maybe slightly down on industrial properties. So again, when you're looking at commercial industrial properties, there's a couple different ways you're looking at. You are looking at sales to help you, but you're also looking at an income property, say a commercial property. What's the vacancy? So again, the more vacancy, the less the value. So the value is not going to go up. But if it sells for a significant amount, we're looking at that too. But those are the two areas that I'm looking at. Are there any sales that help me? And what's guiding us with vacancy rates? capitalization rates, and then the full complement of an income approach to property to come up with values. So if those shopping centers are doing well, then we're going to adjust the retail in one direction and industrial in another. But we can segment that also, office versus apartments and so forth. So there's different ways we would do that. In the case of last year or fiscal year 22, I didn't see that. So that's why there were minimal or no adjustments to those two segments.
I guess I'm just looking at the inequality between the increase on the residential properties versus that on the commercial. And something just doesn't, I think I just need to think about it, maybe come talk to you a little bit more, because something just doesn't quite make sense there. If there's a property that's been empty for, let's say, 15 years, like I'm thinking the old Blockbuster that has location that's been empty, forever. It doesn't seem fair that possibly that property owner is getting a break on their property taxes because they're not getting income from that. There's kind of what's the incentive for them to rent that out? But it's probably a little more.
Yeah, there is a little more complexity to that because they're one tenant space of, I don't know how many in there, 15 or 17 spaces. So you're not, when you're looking at fair and equitable, you're not looking to adjust everybody. I mean, you wouldn't need me if you just said everybody's going to change 5% in the year, then I'd be doing something else, I think. So what the law states is we're valuing things on a what's called a full and fair cash value. So, and it's what's called ad valorem based. It's according to values. So you're adjusting according to the value of the properties. So if segments are moving in different directions, or one is moving way up versus one's moving kind of a medium up, that's how you're adjusting it. So it doesn't mean that we're not following the protocol and the guidelines. We are. It's just I can see what you're saying though. Gee, why did my house go up this and those folks didn't? But I'd be happy to explain it in a little more detail another time if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. No, I completely trust that you are following the rules as they are laid out. I'm just trying to understand, how property taxes are being set and stuff. But thank you very much for that.
One follow-up question too for Will.
Sure, Dennis.
You mentioned that in the assessment, vacancy rate was one consideration. You also mentioned the capitalization rate. Can you explain what that factor is and what is it? The ability to get loans, or what's that referred to?
Yeah, a capitalization rate is a risk rate. So typically your cap rate, the lower the cap rate, the higher the value. It's an inverse relationship between cap rate and value. So as you lower a cap rate, say a cap rate of say 4, that's a lower risk property. That would be, maybe like a standalone United States Post Office is low like that. A higher one may be a restaurant. It may be a 8 or 9 or a 10 cap rate, something like that, because there's some volatility to that. So it's a measurement of risk. And it's one of the factors in an income approach where you're looking at square footage of the building, the gross income, expenses, replacement for reserves, and cap rate. Ultimately, you're coming up with a NOI, a net operating income, and then you're capitalizing that income to produce a value. So that's a straightforward income approach. And also you'd also put a tax factor on it, which would be the tax factor would be loading your cap to the cap rate. So if you had a cap rate of say 8 and you added the tax factor, we're 1612, so it would be 9.6 as a cap rate. So it gets a little complicated, but in essence, it relates to the risk involved with the building. And it's a very, very critical factor in the income approach to value, that whether someone's challenging me on a value, cap rate always comes into play.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that explanation.
You're welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Will. We'll go on to treasurer collector, legal services, human resources, technology. Oh, Heather, go ahead.
So I think my question came about when I reviewed human resources, but it ties to the unclassified insurance, I think, a little bit. But it looks like the insurance premium was going down, but then in subsequent years, it's going to go up 7%. And part of that was to build like a $3.5 million, I don't know what to call it, bank for the self-funding insurance. So I'm just curious, like, what's the logic to have the premium actually go down instead of at least just even keeping it consistent and put that money towards the 3.5 million now?
Jody or Pam? Jody, go ahead.
Yes, so, as you know, we started this health insurance trust. Can't even remember the month now, but we switched March 1st, and it's very complicated. And thankfully, I have some really smart people on that as trustees with me to help figure this out. So we did hire a consultant. I'm sure you know that, and that consulting firm helped us through all this. So, we don't know how this is all going to shake out. And once the first quarter is done and we make the payments and we get the rebates and it shakes out, then we're going to have a clearer picture of where we are and where we're going and how we need to get where we're going. So, there's rebates that we're supposed to get this year to the tune of about $500,000, pharmacy rebates, and they come through the process. We've got the stop loss insurance and so on, but it's really complicated. But I will say, these trustees, we dug in so deep and we asked so many questions. I think the people we hired, their heads were spinning around because no other town has ever asked the level of questions that we asked. So it's really complex, but I think, we just feel like we need to get there in steps. We didn't need to just get there immediately. And so we were following the advice of Hub, our broker. We were comfortable going to a 2.5. It did help the town significantly too. I think Dan told me we saved about $700,000 in the upcoming budget. So, I think we're going in the right direction. We'd like to put all the closeout from health insurance into the trust fund this year. And we will report to the select board and the finance committee about where we're at, but it's very complex. But I think we're doing a good job. And I've got, as I said, Christine Collins and Dan and Pam, and we've got the Christine from the School Teachers Association, and some other folks. Jesse's part of this too, and some really smart conservative people that I think are trying to do this the right way. So we have planned for, I believe, about a 4.5% increase in the fall. But we're doing the best we can. I don't know if anybody, Christine, if you want to say anything more, but I think we're doing a really good thing for the town and the employees, and we're proceeding with baby steps. But I don't know if anybody else on here wants to say any more than that.
Christine, do you have anything to add? No.
Nobody wants to say.
You all said, Heather.
but you know what, we will report right after when we get the first quarter settled and we see where we're going. And I want to get back to the two boards and report on what the trust has been doing and where we're at, and make recommendations for how we continue. So so I don't know if that answers your question, Heather, but you know, we are following the guidance of a broker that has done this many times before. And actually we found savings beyond what the broker has suggested for us. So I don't know. That's about as much as I can tell you.
I think I'm set, Christina. I was just surprised to have a decrease followed by the increase in the subsequent years in FY24 and 25. So that's what I was kind of looking at.
Again, we are going on the guidance of our broker, and he gave us countless spreadsheets, which I did share at select board meetings. I think maybe FinCon too, I don't remember, town meeting. And we were kind of going on his guidance, but again, we were able to up the rebates. Pam helped quite a bit with that to, I think they were estimating our rebates at about 275, and we think they're about 515 maybe. And she also was very active in the stop loss policy. We were able to save a couple $100,000 by making changes with that too. So it's very complex, but we're doing the best job we can, and also trying to, you know, not overextend the town in trying to build up the trust. We think we could do it over several years.
So it does kind of sound a little bit like it may not be as big an increase in FY24 and 25 as what's in there now. It's just, it's so new that there's
that would be our goal. That would be our goal. I mean, some of it is based on utilization. And so that's not as predictable. But again, we've learned a lot, right, Christine and Dan? And I don't know if Christine's even, I have her frozen on my screen, but it's been quite a complex undertaking. But I think we're doing a good thing for the town. So we'll keep reporting on it.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank you.
Christine, go ahead.
I think too, Heather, that the increase that we're projecting now is lower than the increase we would have projected had we not gone to self-funded. Is that right, Dean?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, with the, like, was it 4.5%? I think we have a 4% budget for November 1st with some extra capacity for no enrollees. So in the past, we budgeted 8%, but we're projecting that a 4 would be, with our, of course, help from our insurance broker, a 4 should be sufficient for that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll keep going down the list. Technology, town clerk, permitting, Conservation Commission, land management, planning board, zoning board of appeals, town hall, public buildings and property maintenance. There we go. John Cunningham.
Okay. In answer to your questions you had earlier, Christine, they had on the library and the council on aging have each requested to maintain their maintenance lines. I understand the library, since I think that's according to the town charter, but why did the council on aging opt out of town maintenance of the facilities department? And also a second question, does that mean they don't participate in town-wide on-call contracts like elevators and generators and things like that?
Is Paul Fox here, or I don't see him?
I am available.
Oh, okay.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, Paul. Thank you.
I have no problems answering the second part of the question, which is in regards to, do they still participate? And yes, they still participate. And I can say that Jennifer, Clara, and I talk very often, and you know, we're in communication in regards to the building maintenance needs of her building. It's just I think the current proposal is that she still holds on to the pure oversight of each one of those line items. But nope, they still have all the access to all of our town procurement that is done.
But did they give a reason for not wanting to participate, along with the library and the maintenance lines?
Jennifer, do you want to?
Sure, I'll be glad to answer that. Yeah. Our board, we've been maintaining our building. I can only speak for since I've been at Westford for the past 6 years. And we felt like we had a good handle on things. So that is why we decided to maintain those light items in our budget.
Jody?
Yeah, I mean, we, like to work collaboratively with people, and we didn't want to force people to give up their maintenance money right now. We're working, Jennifer and Ellen work very closely with Paul. So, some people were less comfortable than others, and so we went along with that. So we like to be collaborative. It doesn't mean we won't be doing a good job with them and maintaining the buildings, but, sometimes you need a certain comfort level to take that step. So, so we respected their decision to continue to just kind of hold the reins on those. So maybe next year they'll change their mind, or maybe they won't. We'll see.
Thanks, Jody. John, does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers it.
Heather?
I had the same question as John, so I'm all set.
Okay. I'm going to go on to Health and Human Services and Board of Health. Any questions for the Board of Health? No. Heather?
I just had a question on one of the answers, the immunization revolving fund. Is that ever used for anything, or are there any plans in the future to use that for anything?
Sure. Good evening. Yes, actually, what we do is we purchase our vaccine. We have to purchase it almost 7 months ahead. So we purchase that vaccine, and then whatever we get back in rebates from folks that are insured, we get an admin fee, goes back into the revolving account. When we put on, for instance, in a couple of weeks, we'll put on a shingles vaccine clinic, we'll take funding from that account.
So as follow-up, I remember from prior years that balance just keeps growing. Are there any projects that would kind of knock that balance back down?
Sure. It has been growing in the past too. We also purchase a lot of medical supplies, clinic supplies through that account. And with the COVID funding that we've received this year, that is paid for all those medical supplies. So that has been growing in the last couple of years, if you've noticed. But we certainly are working, like I said, right now on a shingles vaccine, it runs about $3,000 for 10 people. So we are hoping to knock that down this year.
Beth?
Hi, I was just wondering if you could explain the mental health outreach program that was listed in your goals and how you're gonna, what that means and how you're gonna coordinate that with other departments.
Sure, absolutely. So I've been working closely. We have a regional community health and wellness coordinator, which is grant funded. She's full-time and she works for 4 communities, Westford being the host. And we have been working very hard in the last month putting together what we hope to be a mental health task force within the community. So we've just put together a list of stakeholders. We've just drafted an email that we hope to get out early next week. The goal for that program is to we've pulled lots of data across Westford. We've looked at the mental health survey that was recently done by the Town and Safety Task Force. We've looked at Emerson, the Greater Lawrence surveys within the last 5 years. We've pulled our own health department surveys. We've talked to the police department. So we've been working towards this goal. And as I said, our hope is to put this task force together where folks could meet once a month. We hope to pull in the schools, our police department, fire department, and go over data and see what is the need in the community and how can we address that? What services are currently available and what do we need to bring in? So we're hoping to kind of pull everyone together, the mobile clinician, senior center, all folks that are interested in being a part of the group.
Thanks, Ray. Anybody else? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I'll go on to Council on Aging. Any questions? No. Veterans? Oh, Beth?
I just had a question about, I noticed that the health board of health uses interns, and I was wondering if the Council on Aging ever used interns, like social work interns or, other interns to support programs.
Yes, let's see here. Yeah, we actually use interns through Westford Academy, through the high school, through their program. But as far as having interns for social services, we haven't done that. I mean, again, we're dealing a lot with confidentiality, and sometimes, it's easier for us to kind of work. We have the history with a lot of the clients already in tax, so it's a lot easier for people to, to share whatever their concerns may be with someone that they already know, and they don't have to, kind of reinvent the wheel and kind of go over a lot of information that they've already, had in previous experiences. So to answer your question, as far as interns like from Boston University or, other institutions that have social services programs or counseling programs, we have not.
We'll move on to debt services. Dan and Christine, or Heather, do you have a question, or? Okay. Did you want to present anything, or do we just want to go on to questions?
Just expecting to answer questions, but they'd like to talk about, we could do that.
I'm having a hard time hearing Christine. I don't know if it's just me.
Okay, I said I was expecting to answer questions. If you would like me to do more than that, we can work on that. We have a lot of backup documentation that was provided. As you know, those of you who have been around for a few years, we use the debt follow-up schedule that allows us to plot the existing debt that we have by different categories: excluded, non-excluded, water, CPA debt, and stormwater. And when a project is being seriously considered, even before it's authorized, like the one in Maine, like the library expansion project, like the school administration buildings, these things that have been discussed at length and seem to have support, and some money has already been spent, we usually do add those in a section in the page they would be going on. So for those new buildings, we have plotted them on the excluded page of the debt fall-off schedule, and we're able to kind of plug in the year we think we're going to begin to spend money on the debt, how many years we want to borrow for, how much we want to borrow, and the rate of interest. And then we're able to take those numbers and try to figure out what that would cost in the tax rate, along with the debt we've already excluded. So you were all given quite a bit of information regarding the new buildings and the way that the tax rate is shaping up. And it more or less does seem to say to us that the amount of debt that is dropping off from the excluded debt would leave room for new projects to come on to replace it. So that's, I guess, where I would be. Any questions?
I have questions. Yeah, Heather.
So I understand that, and I've poured over the debt schedule, but I think one of the questions was, the concern of back-to-back, which I think it would actually be back-to-back votes for debt exclusion. I mean, what's the strategy to kind of get the buy-in from the voters? I don't know that they're going to be interested in reviewing that kind of schedule.
Well, the whole purpose of debt exclusion is for towns to be able to continue to do these larger projects, but that the voters would have a say. And so, hopefully the voters would feel that these projects are worthy projects that are needed by the community. And that's the point of excluded debt. Back before, before exclusions came along, before 2.5 came in, if a town needed something or wanted to raise the budget, they just raised the taxes. They didn't have the controls of Proposition 2.5. It wasn't meant to keep us from ever raising taxes. It was intended to allow voters a say in the process. So I guess my answer to that question would be that if we think it's important, we should begin talking to the public about it now and get their input about what their priorities are. I think they have spoken. I think there have been surveys done in some cases. I've heard about different things, but we need to talk about it early and often, and try to explain it at every opportunity at town meetings, and what that future is going to look like. Because the numbers that we're seeing when we plot all of this is that the tax rate, even after the library comes on a few years from now, will not be impacted any more than it's being impacted right now with the schools and the fire station. So, how people will view that, it's hard to say, Heather.
I think part of it too, though, is as when we were talking to the assessor, more and more of the burden falls to residential. So people do see their tax bills going up more than 2.5%, and they don't really understand that it's the whole, not the individual. And then the only other thing I wanted to add is I think for all these building projects, it would be helpful to have an operating cost projection. I mean, I know it's difficult, but there are some things that would be easier, like supplies for the building, janitorial fees, some kind of dollars for HVAC, because we have talked about how the budget is so tight for operating, but bringing on a bigger library, bringing on the town hall building, taking off something else, possibly the rec center. It just seems like there could be a real pinch with operating costs.
Yeah, that's probably something for a little outside of my scope. But I do want to say one thing about the tax rate and the increasing values. You may have noticed that your values went up, but the tax rate went down. The tax rate this year was $16.12. I believe last year it was $16.56. So there's a natural seesaw in the equation for setting the tax rate. And so the people who are going to pay considerably more are those whose property value changed outside of the overall norms for the town. So, if someone is seeing a much larger than 2.5% increase, it probably means that their property experienced a larger increase in value than their neighbors did for whatever reason, whether they own a particular style home that's more desirable, and so those values went up at a rate that's different than my ranch. You know what I mean? So values going up on its own, that does not necessarily mean that people are going to be paying more than 2.5% in their taxes, because the rate will come down as the values go up. That's just the seesaw that's built into the calculation. Anyway.
Jody?
Yeah, I think we can try to come up with a estimate of it operating on the 51 Main building. I think it might be more difficult on something like the rec center because we don't know what they're building. So I don't know how I would start to do that, but we'll see if we can come up with something on an estimate on that building, Heather.
Thanks, Jody. Anything else on debt service? Okay, we're going to go on to unclassified. Anything under unclassified? Anyone have any questions? I'm not seeing anything. Okay, I think we're about done. We're on approval of minutes, which we don't have any. So, Andrea, if you guys want to adjourn.
I think so. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move. Second.
Okay. All those in favor, just raise your hands. Great. Thank you. Thanks,
Nice.
guys. Good night.
Night.
Hi, everyone.
So we'll go on to the discussion of the printing and mailing of the finance committee books. I think we kind of had this as a placeholder. Dan has been helping me put together the actual wording of the warrant article, but that didn't come back. We still have to, we have a question outstanding for legal, right?
All right, yeah, I'm gonna follow up with Greg Corbo tomorrow. Let's try to put this to rest because we have to include the warrant for the select board packet on Tuesday. So that's my goal for tomorrow.
Okay. There's nothing really that's changed. It's the same thing that we discussed, I don't know, a month ago. I've gotten quite a bit of feedback. It seems positive, so I think we're in good shape. Does anyone have any questions or anything on that?
Oh, sorry.
Heather?
Is there a plan for us to do any kind of outreach? Just, okay.
Yeah. Once we get the wording of the actual warrant article, like all the markups and everything, I think by next week I was gonna start putting together a little presentation. If I'm hoping to get to WestfordCAT and do like a little quick video on it, we'll see. But I will definitely do something if I don't do the video.
Christina?
Yep.
Just a question on the issue of the full day kindergarten. I know that we're eventually going to have to vote on the school budget. I mean, can that be placed as a separate vote on that, or we're going to have to do the whole school committee, the whole school budget at the same time?
You mean as far as voting the FY23 budget?
The approval of that component of it. You know, it was presented to us tonight as kind of a standalone option. I just think it might be a good idea to have a separate discussion on that alone. There's not really much of a problem that I can see with the rest of the budget, but this is kind of an interesting issue. I think it needs some further discussion by us.
But you're talking full day kindergarten in the FY23 budget?
Yeah, so maybe we're not talking about that, or maybe we want to render a recommendation. I mean, it's not, we're not acting on it now, I take it, right, for this budget. So, or what we are, yeah.
Right, well, so that's the thing. And let me just say one thing, Ingrid, and then I'll get to you. The funny thing is that, you know, full day kindergarten is going in next school year, but technically it's not affecting the budget.
Okay.
So there's kind of this, you know, we can talk about the school budget for FY23, but full day kindergarten is not technically impacting it. Go ahead, Ingrid.
Well, and we just have to remember that, you know, unlike a lot of other budgets, the school budget is one number, and we don't have the authority to direct the school committee and, you know, the school staff of how they allocate those funds.
Beth?
Well, I'm just wondering why we would question the school committee. It sounds like they've already made this decision to use the ESSER funds to fund this. Are we going to question the town's use of ARPA? I mean, are we going to be debating all the things that the town is using that money for? Because I don't think we have. And so I'm not sure why we would question the school committee when the decision's already been made for next year. And as you said, it's not impacting the budget because they're using the federal funding, so.
Can I respond to that?
Go ahead, Dennis.
All right, so here's the concern, the responsibility that we have. If, and I think Jody set the tone when she wrote her budget message. If we see town departments that are now building out budgets based upon ESSER and ARPA funds and things like that, we have a responsibility to evaluate whether or not these are sustainable initiatives or not, and we should have some sort of an opinion. I'm not saying that we have to vote out a warrant article or something like that, but there should be some sort of a communication that we deliberated. They presented it to us. They gave it. They let us look at it, and I think we have a responsibility to evaluate what we saw and inform the town what we see. That's all.
Heather?
I kind of agree with that. I wonder if the schools plan to present that to town meeting. I just feel like somehow and maybe it's in the verbiage of our report, but somehow I think the town needs to understand, the voters at town meeting, that this budget doesn't include any money for full day, but in following years, it will be taking budget money for full day. And I just think it's an education that needs to happen at town meeting.
Yeah. What I would say is we've had sort of a little preamble that we've written in the finance committee book that, we kind of say things that we're sort of looking at or looking forward. But, I think we could add something to that. I think, Dennis, you've worked on it in the past. And
all right, so we'll draw a little picture about it. That's good. I see where you're going. Okay.
Tom?
I also think, and this was what I was trying to allude to earlier, I think it's also on us to say, yes, that number is coming next year after, and basically put the schools on notice that they need to work really hard to find actual savings, not just the reduced increase, right? But reevaluate, whether it's office supplies or, obviously office supplies isn't going to make up $800,000, but they are aware that this is part of their plan. So it's on them to also implement that plan and not just say, okay, well, we're phasing it in, but it's actually going to be this impact. So, yes, it is on us to say, yes, we're concerned about it, but again, we're aware of it. And it is a lot easier to deal with something that we're aware of than, again, the state turning around and saying, well, next year, guess what? You have to have full day kindergarten built in. And now we're hit with it all at once and no one's been able to account for it. So I think that may be the message that we need to give to Dr. Chu and the school committee, is we expect to see some actual savings to account for it.
Heather, do you have something else?
I'm just kind of thinking as we're going, I wonder, I agree having it in the beginning in the preamble to our book, but I also wonder if it's something that we would present to town meeting as part of that article, just kind of an alert that the schools are on notice that they need to look for cost savings, like Tom just said. And, we approve the budget. We don't obviously want to create a problem, but I don't know. I don't know if it's worth a hold, if it's just a conversation in the book. I don't know.
I think we can think about it. I mean, again, I think we have to remember that the school budget is a total. And so, we only have so much that we can do. We can certainly bring it to people's attention if we feel that it's an area of concern. So I think we can probably, I think we should just do that. Okay, anything else? Nope. So our next meeting is May 5th. So we have a little bit of a break. But at that point, we're talking warrant articles, I believe. And pretty soon after that, maybe 2 weeks or so after that, I think May 16th, the book is due, Dan. Is that the right date?
There's a couple days before, just so we can get that done. So submissions as early as possible. Once you're done writing them, what I can do is I can send out the book with all the budget numbers, if that helps, in each section, just so people aren't looking them all up and they're ready to go.
That would be great. Yeah. Okay. So if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Heather?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Ingrid?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Good night.